Welcome to the Half Point Per podcast. I am your host, Evan Riggs, joined as always by my co-host, Dalton Willie. No producer Johnny Pham this week. You know, he made this big thing, Dalton, about not telling us where he was going to be last week, and we both had it guessed. Like I'm 99% sure he is skiing right now. So Johnny is skiing. Hopefully, comes back with no broken limbs. We are here. I am not giving this one a podcast number because this is going to be a YouTube stream only. It's going to be pretty short and sweet, I think, unless we get people that hop in the comments and have a ton of questions, which that can be kind of hit or miss. But we've got a start sit stream this week. We've each got a couple of each category to bring to this one. The starts have been pretty good. The sits a little bit hit or miss. The streams, for the most part, pretty good, I think, too. So I think we've done pretty well on these so far. Hopefully we can keep that going for championship week. But before we get too far into it, how was your Christmas, broken phone aside?
Well, you know, when a couch eats your phone on Christmas Eve and you can't get a new one on Christmas Day, that's never fun. Didn't get to watch any football on Christmas, probably for the best after the Kansas City performance, but got a ton of who should I start this week from random people at every Christmas event, which is always fun. They're like, hey, look at my team in my 6-man super flex. I don't know who to start between Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, Dak Prescott, and Brock Purdy. I'm like, oh.
Well, I hope you didn't tell him to start Brock Purdy. That one went poorly, and Mahomes went very poorly, too.
Well, unfortunately, I cannot give advice on leagues under 10. So that's just a rule.
All right. On that note, Dalton, before we get to the start sit stream, I did just have a couple of very short topics. And if any of these guys are one of your start sit streams, I apologize. But probably the biggest story of championship week, I don't know, or of semifinal week, excuse me. I don't know how much of the games you got to see, was Amari Cooper just going off for 1,000,000 points and 1,000,000 yards and 1,000,000 catches and like 2 touchdowns, I think it was. Joe Flacco is averaging 330 yards and 2.5 passing touchdowns in 4 starts. That is just the kind of season we are having this year. Is we are getting 2011 Joe Flacco. I think that was the year they won the Super Bowl.
I think you're right.
I mean, are we full steam ahead on Amari Cooper? Like, if you're doing weekly ranks, would he be inside your top 12 receivers this week?
It's hard this week. They play the Jets, which significantly, I mean, that Jets defense has been salty. I would probably rank him top 18, I would say. Expert consensus ranking on Fantasy Pros right now has him at 20. With a 2-star matchup. Surprisingly, Rashee Rice is 11th. But that's kind of crazy. But yeah, I'd probably have him inside the top 18, but it is going to be a tough week. I would not expect another explosion like last week. But Joe Flacco is playing like full on like F-it ball. He's playing like Jameis Winston did his last year at the Bucs, where he's like, someone's down there, I'm throwing it, and every play is electric. And it's a fun storyline.
Well, and Flacco has said, I don't know if you saw, he said in his press conference after the game, or it was before that, at some point in a recent press conference, made the comment that this would probably be his last year. He's probably hanging it up after this year. So it's like, hey, like, what better way to go out than just chuck it deep at every play? And that's just kind of what's happening right now.
I just have to say, though, how bad is Deshaun Watson?
I mean,
Joe Flacco
he already has the most passing touchdowns of any Cleveland quarterback, Joe Flacco.
Joe Flacco comes in, does not know the system, has no familiarity with the players, and starts throwing for 300 yards a game. Deshaun Watson is 2 years in the system, should have familiarity with the players, and was averaging 218 yards per game and had a higher touchdown interception ratio than Zach Wilson right now. So,
hey, I'm just saying, wouldn't it have been a better idea for the Jets to keep Joe Flacco instead of Zach Wilson as the backup quarterback?
Absolutely.
Imagine where they might be right now.
Joe Flacco and that Jets offense. Let's see what happens.
Not that would be this great, but I mean, Flacco had his moments. He had his moments last year with the Jets, which is more than you can say about Zach Wilson for the most part. He's had 1 or 2 flashes.
Yeah, no, it's insane. It's super fun. It's a fun storyline for the fantasy playoffs. For everybody who started Amari Cooper, I'm sure they're excited.
Yeah.
For everybody who played against Amari Cooper, I'm sure you wish Joe Flacco retired in 2011.
Amari Cooper is probably going to have one of the larger Like every year when I think it's CBS and Yahoo, even he has all those places put out the highest rostered players on championship teams. Cooper is going to be on that list, even if he absolutely craps the bed this week, which would be a very Amari Cooper thing to do. Would be to have 5 points this week.
I know the most rostered players are Mostert and CMC. I saw that stat earlier, which makes a lot of sense considering their touchdown equity in their offenses.
Yeah, Mostert has more rushing touchdowns this year than he had in his in any season or actually was it any season in his career or total? I think it actually
he has more than his entire career.
Yeah, total this year. Real quick on Cooper, I think I would have him fringe top 12. I know it's tough, like you said, the matchup is not good, but in those 4 starts for Flacco, again, the stats not going to keep up how they are for Flacco, but what can keep up is Amari Cooper's volume, and that's a 29% target share, 48% air yard share in the 3-4 full games with Flacco at quarterback. So just elite usage. Sure, go for it.
All right. Mike Evans at New Orleans.
I mean, I'm going Mike Evans. I know that he's you could always get a Mike Evans ejected in the first quarter.
No, Marshawn Lattimore's out.
Oh, that's true. That's true. Okay, then definitely Mike Evans.
Puka Nacua against the Giants.
I think you have to go Puka Nacua. I mean, all the reasons I said Devontae Smith was my star of the week last week, that like all applies to Puka times 2 because he's been a lot more consistent than
Stephon Diggs, who's wide receiver 14 this week.
Yep, and we'll talk about him in just a minute, but I'm taking Amari Cooper over Stephon Diggs this week.
DK Metcalf versus Pitt.
This is both of these guys are kind of the same to me, where it's like they could have huge weeks or they could be zeros, and that applies to most people, but I think everybody knows Cooper has kind of made it like that has been his brand is explosions and duds. He obviously has been, has had consistent seasons too, but even within those seasons, he has been up and down. That's how he always is. And that, I don't know if that's even true on DK, but it feels true for DK this year. So I think I would just go Cooper because he's just on such a tear right now, but it's close for sure.
Cooper is at home and his splits at home have always been better.
Yeah, agreed. Anybody else for your name game here?
We'll do someone underneath him just for fun.
Okay.
Let's do Zay Flowers versus Miami. Zay Flowers finally got a touchdown.
He did catch a touchdown. Had a nice game. I'm still going Amari Cooper though. I mean the ceiling that Cooper has demonstrated is higher than what Zay Flowers has so far.
Yeah, I agree. All right.
Stephon Diggs, you mentioned him a minute ago. Not really too much to say on him and Kelsey, but I did just want to, point out and bring up that those two guys who are usually fantasy stalwarts, just unusually tough to trust, but also like, what are you benching either of those guys? No, probably not. But with Stephon Diggs, since week 10, the Bills are a -4% drop back over expected. Diggs in that stretch, 8.2 targets per game. He was a 10.6. Before that, 9 games since he had his last 100-yard game. We talked about a lot over the last couple of weeks how James Cook's involvement has just gone up and up, and that was again true this last week. So, you brought him up in the name game with Cooper or Diggs. I don't think did you say what you prefer, Cooper or Diggs this week?
No, but I would go with Cooper.
So
that's a tough one.
Yeah.
Since Joe Brady took over this Bills offense, and I think you have it on your sheet, they're not passing as frequently. They're running the ball more often. Amari Cooper hasn't been a non-factor, but he has not been like Josh Allen's bailout because it just feels like
Stephon Diggs.
Yeah, sorry. It just feels like they're not playing hero ball, and that's not requiring Josh Allen to look to Stephon Diggs in every matchup. They're spreading the ball out more. Since week 12, Josh Allen has more completions to his tight ends than he does to Stephon Diggs. It's pretty wild what's going on. I don't think Stephon Diggs is like trash or not good or anything like falling off a cliff. I just really think this offense is trying to build itself in a way that Josh Allen doesn't just need Stephon Diggs. And it'll make for some interesting offseason conversations.
He is still getting, 8 targets a game, which it's not what it was before, but that's still not like he's not getting some volume there. So I do think some regression is coming. I do think you have to keep him in your lineups. I do think you probably have to just lower expectations and hope that he has a boom week in your lineup as kind of a wide receiver 2 type of guy. But it's wild. Like the only guy you feel, the Bills are on this tear, and the only guy you feel confident starting outside of the quarterback is James Cook.
Yeah, and he even disappointed last week.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know what's going on. The new Bills offense is doing well for the Bills. I don't know if it's doing well for their fantasy production outside of 2 guys. Not to mention Dalton Kincaid, who's been pretty big zero as of late.
Yeah, it's funny because that first game that Knox was back, it was like, oh, Kincaid actually had a season high in route participation, so it's fine. Then the next week he scores 0 points, and we're like, okay, panic mode. And last week it's like, well, he had an okay game, but the participation is down a little bit. It's like, number one, I just don't get it. We talked about this a lot before. We were hoping this wouldn't happen. Number two, yeah, I don't think you can start Kincaid with any sort of confidence at this point, which is really too bad because the talent merits a start. It's just the situation right now does not. A situation that is obviously shaky is the KC Chiefs. We know this, but what has happened over the last 4 weeks is Travis Kelce, 8.4 PPR points per game, which is easily his worst stretch with Mahomes at quarterback. I saw somebody point out this is the worst stretch that with Mahomes at quarterback since week 1 of 2018, when I think he had like basically nothing. It's like, okay, so we're just looking at a single game versus a month here. They do get the Bengals, who are allowing the second most points to tight end position this year. So while Kelce may not be tight end 1 in your ranks this week, I just don't see how you're not jogging him back out there again in your lineup.
No, you got to. I mean, with him even missing a game, Travis Kelce is third. He's 4 points under Sam Laporta in total scoring.
Mm-hmm.
And I know like 8 points a game doesn't sound exciting, but when it comes to the tight end position, that's pretty good. It's not Kelce numbers, what we've come to expect of him, and it's definitely been a bad year. But I mean, there's no getting off of him. He has a good matchup. He's the only thing that's going right in the Chiefs' passing attack.
Him and Rashee Rice in spots. I think the bigger conversation that is going to be had about Kelce, especially in Dynasty, is it like, oh, is this because he is over the hill? It's funny. We're going to have all these conversations, and then he still is going to get 1,000 yards receiving for the 8th straight year. He still, by all intents and purposes, has had an awesome year. Even over the last 6 weeks, if he just scores a couple touchdowns, which he hasn't scored a touchdown for over a month, if he's just scored a touchdown or 2, he would be you'd feel a lot better probably about it. And of course, he dropped one against the Patriots, so that easily could have been one there. But I think what has happened more, and you can tell me if you agree or disagree, I do think, Kelce can't get open against man as easily as he used to be able to, which he's 34. We all know that that's going to happen. But I still think Kelce is awesome, and he's just getting halo coverage every week, and teams are saying to the Chiefs, okay, literally anybody else beat us, and that is happening on a week in, week out basis. And that is the bigger issue for Kelce than any drop-off in skill or, athleticism or whatever the case may be.
Yeah, I mean, this is like you're playing a video game against your little brother, and he's playing with his friend, and his friend's good, and you just let your little brother do whatever. And that's what every defense is doing with the Chiefs defense. They're focusing all of their efforts on stopping Travis Kelce, and they're letting the wide receiver core run, one-on-one in man coverage. But the wide receivers are so terrible at their job that they can't get anything done. I mean, it is really abysmal how bad the wide receiver play has been in Kansas City outside of Rashee Rice. MVS is on pace to run the most routes in the NFL and not get 600 receiving yards. It'll be the first time in history a player has run over 400 routes and not gotten 600 receiving yards. Do you know how hard that is? Like even one busted coverage and he could be halfway there, but they're just so bad.
Well, he's got to catch the ball to do that.
Yeah.
On those busted coverage, or not veer straight into where a safety is when his quarterback is throwing him away from the safety. These are things that could help him do that. Okay. No more Chiefs. On that note, Dalton, let's get into start-sit streams of the week. Like I said, especially with the starts, we've had pretty good success. So I feel like we have some high billings to live up to this week, and the most important week for those of you still playing championship week. We each came with 2. I cheated and came with 3 only because I realized after I did my first 2 that one of them is now on the injury report. So I'm not certain he's playing this week. I hope he is. And that is Chuba Hubbard for the Panthers. Miles Sanders is banged up. They get a matchup against the Jags, which, I think they're like 20th or they're like middle of the road in running back points per game, but they are number 1 in receptions allowed to running backs this season. The main thing with Hubbard right now is he has a hamstring issue that he's dealing with. So obviously, if he plays, you start him. If not, you don't have to worry about it. 11 points per game-ish in his last 3, but the touches, 25, 24, 17. Like you just have to roll that out there in a decent matchup where he could get even more receiving work than these last couple of weeks because it's been mostly on the ground for him.
Yeah, I'm wheels up on that, and we'll talk more about that game later too, because one of my sets is in that game. But it's going to be an ugly matchup on both sides. There's clearly something wrong with Trevor Lawrence, and the Panthers have a really good pass defense. You just put that in tandem with the only thing the Panthers are playing for is pride. They don't want to lose this game because it doesn't matter for them. They don't have their first round pick, and last week they got something figured out against a very suspect Green Bay Packers defense, obviously. But that's exciting. The Jacksonville Jaguars are 22nd in points allowed to running backs. So you have a good matchup on paper for that. And then obviously the touches that exist there are incredibly profitable. And you're just chasing that at that point if you're in your championship. And maybe you're without a guy like Pacheco, who looks like he's probably not going to be a go this week.
Yeah. So like if Pacheco does not play, would you rather start CEH or Chuba Hubbard this week?
Wow, what a transition, because my start of the week is Clyde Edwards-Helaire. I would rather start CEH. Okay. He's also my start of the week. So
I'm going with Chuba in that.
So since DJ Reader has been out for Cincinnati, which is the last 2 weeks, they've allowed 24.7 points to Ty Chandler and 23.8 to Najee Harris. Those aren't world beaters at running back, neither is CEH. But the Chiefs in the red zone also have consistently used running back. They are the 4th in the NFL in red zone touches to their running backs.
CEH is also the best high point catcher on the Chiefs, apparently.
Yeah, against New England. I don't know how he did that. And then you combine that with we said we were done with Casey talk, but nothing is getting going with this wide receiver group, and that they are running an excessive amount of screens to their running backs, trying to get something going in the air through those pass plays. Combine that with Cincinnati's entire defensive line is banged up at this point. I think it's a good smash spot for CEH and would be the chef's kiss to his fantasy career in Kansas City to go out on winning people championships and ending up wherever he ends up in this offseason, which surely won't be Kansas City.
Well, and the thing that's different this week is there's no Jerick McKinnon either.
Yes.
He's on IR. He got put on IR before last week. McKinnon was stealing some of those red zone work, including carry on the 1 yard line that I think he cashed for a touchdown a couple weeks ago when CEH was also active and Pacheco was not. So yeah, you also have that where it's like it's CEH. And then it is maybe Deneric Prince is elevated from the practice squad. Maybe Keontae Ingram. P-Rhyme for sure will be the RB2, I think, because he actually was active and did get a couple snaps against the Raiders the other day. But, CEH is the only guy who's been on this roster all year who's going to be active in that backfield if Pacheco misses.
Yeah, and I'm just betting on a little bit of familiarity, and then I'm betting on how bad this Bengals team has been, and the Chiefs need just to run the ball more frequently because of their passing attack having so many holes right now.
So my next one, I'm going right back to, I've got a lot of Panthers Jaguars talk today, which I don't know how I feel about that. My star of the week, second star of the week, I should have just given my first two because I from the same game here, is Travis Etienne. And now I was a little surprised when I went and looked at the ranks. This one's probably kind of weak. He's the RB6, which, again, I was surprised by because I said last week, and he had another game where he didn't really do anything, and that was mainly because they got blown out so badly he got kind of scripted out of it. But like the efficiency just hasn't been there, and I don't think that's his fault. I think their O-line is not good. Their offense has just not been good. Lawrence has been so banged up, but this Panthers team allows a league high 1.3 rushing touchdowns per game to running backs. Nobody else is over 1. So it's a good matchup. He only has 2 touchdowns since week 8. I think he's kind of due for a little bit of regression in that category too. And whether it's Trevor Lawrence or the backup quarterback, I think it makes perfect sense for them to lean on that rushing attack and on ETN this week. And again, it's not like I am breaking ground by telling people to start him, but I had no idea where he was ranked until a couple minutes ago. He's on my team, and let me just say, if I were in the finals, I think I would have had to look at my roster and think, okay, do I want to trust Travis Etienne again this week? And I just think the matchup and kind of the situation is such that you should throw him out there again this week.
Yeah. One of my sits of the week again is a Jacksonville Jaguar that we'll get to, but that's why we have all these stats, and this game seems to be our focus point for the entire podcast. But Carolina allows the 4th least passing yards, so they're going to need to get things going on the ground. They're 29th in defense against running backs. Part of that is probably because they've been blown out so many times. Teams don't have to pass. But the last 4 weeks, even Carolina has been gashed by the run. They just don't have anybody inside to pressure the running backs. Travis Etienne is 6th in the NFL in red zone touches among running backs, which correlates to his high touchdown equity. Mm-hmm. You're looking for a boom week if you're in the fantasy finals, and he's definitely a guy who sets up to be that. And if Trevor Lawrence plays with his bad shoulder and coming off of a concussion, he's going to probably.
He also has a high ankle sprain.
Yeah, he's going to be playing the short game, and that's going to be Travis Etienne money.
Yep, agreed. I'll give my third one here real quick, and this will be a great surprise for you. My third star of the week is Darren Waller. If you've made it this far, in spite of Waller, you may not want. You may have better options. I'm not saying you throw him in there as boom tight end 5 this week, but what I am saying, or maybe you're in the Sacco because of him, and maybe he can help make up for that by at least winning that game for you. But what I am saying is that I see him. Let me look on Fantasy Pros at their consensus here. He is tight end 14. Like Dalton Kincaid's tight end 12. I'm starting to over Dalton Kincaid this week for sure. 2 of his 4 best games this year, including his best game, were with Tyrod Taylor at quarterback. So I'm not too scared about Tyrod Taylor being at quarterback. The Rams are top 5 in yards allowed to tight ends this year, or bottom 5, whichever way you want to look at that. They're very bad against tight ends this year. They're giving up the 2nd most touchdowns and 5th most fantasy points per game. Waller played 63% of the snaps last week after being below 50 the week before. Seems like he's kind of ramping up after missing a large chunk of time. I am firing up Darren Waller as a top 10 tight end this week if I've got him.
Yeah, I have nothing to say about that. I mean, let's go. This fantasy season has been it's been something. Yeah. And I just can't find a way to. It would just make perfect sense for Darren Waller to go off for 2 touchdowns this week.
Yes, 100%.
My last start is Ty Chandler. He plays the Packers, who allow the 6th most rushing yards and have allowed a top 12 rusher in 9 of their last 10 games.
Oh my god,
pretty insane. The only time they didn't was actually last week too, Chuba, which is whatever. 65% of the snaps went to Ty Chandler, even with Madison back last week. It's all wheels up for me for Alexander Madison. This Packers defense is terrible. They're without Jerry Alexander because he's getting suspended for flipping a coin, basically.
Yeah, what are we doing, Packers?
I don't know why Joe Barry still has a job in Green Bay, but as long as he does, I'm going to start Ty Chandler. I think he's going to have a pretty big week for this Minnesota offense, especially then without TJ Hawkinson. They're going to be looking for somebody else to run some of those seam routes, and I think some of that's going to fall on the running back because Ed Oliver he's a wide tight end. He's not a pass catcher.
Well, and then obviously the other thing with Ty Chandler is that Madison comes back or plays last week, and they kind of tell us they're it's going to be both guys, and then it was very clearly Chandler is the starter, Madison is the backup, and that was new, and we hope that continues this week because Madison Chandler, is definitely in a very nice spot and has acquitted himself every bit as well as Madison did, if not better, probably this season.
Yeah, so I think that's a pretty good spot for him to be in. Minnesota's still fighting for a playoff spot too, so they're gonna throw everything they have at this Green Bay defense.
Mm-hmm. Sits of the week and where I am going to start is no surprise. I have spent much of the last 2 months dogging Tony Pollard, so why stop now? Tony Pollard, was that game was Christmas. Did you watch that game? Did you see the play where he didn't score the touchdown?
Yeah, where his whole body but the ball was in.
Yeah, so I don't have that screenshot of whole body.
Do you have the field in front of him and he just needs to walk in?
I wish I had the all 22 angle, but I have an Adam Levitan tweet. Let me share it here. Look at that. Just run to the pylon, man. What? And it's even more obvious on the all 22. But it's like, good Lord. Like, he has been so bad this year. And you see in this tweet, if you can read it, he has 11 carries inside the 5 this year. He scored touchdowns on 2 of them. Like,
well,
go ahead.
He has, I saw this earlier, he has 67 red zone opportunities this season. Rico Dowdle has 43 less than him, and they are tied in touchdowns. It's so terrible. With that angle, Evan, could you score there?
I mean, could I score there? No. But you know what I would try to do? Cut inside, because I would not be able to beat that guy in the pylon. Can I run him over? Obviously not. But I would cut inside and just pray he wasn't expecting that.
Could Anthony Sherman, former fullback for the Chiefs, score there? I think so.
Oh, yeah.
I think so.
Yeah. I mean, get like Jason Kelsey catching that pitch. He is beating that man to the pylon right there. Like, he had such a clear angle to the pylon. It's like his vision has been bad all year. Like, I know maybe the O-line's not great run blocking, yeah, but like you said, Rico Dowdle, he's done it. So I think his vision has been part of the problem, not hitting the correct holes in the red zone inside the 5. His explosive run rate is 18th in the NFL, which obviously that's not terrible. But this is a guy who was 4th last year and 3rd the year before. So clearly we've talked about just doesn't quite have that gear. He's combined for 11 points his last 2 weeks. That's after a month of double figures. Everyone's like, oh, Tony Pollard's back. It's like, well, no, actually, Tony Pollard is just along for the ride and will have good weeks when the offense allows him to have good weeks. I mean, and he even should have had a good week last week if he just hit that pylon. But the thing is, the Lions are allowing the fewest points per game to running backs in the NFL this year. They are 26th against receivers, 28th against quarterbacks. So to me, this is setting up to be a plus matchup for the passing game. A big minus for Pollard, who, number one, you have not been able to trust Tony Pollard this year anyway. And number two, the Cowboys have been throwing a lot more than running anyway. So you would expect that to continue when the matchup dictates it like it does this week.
Yeah, I'm definitely out on Tony Pollard. I would start CEH over him.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe even Zeke over him. It's pretty.
Definitely starting Zeke over him. Zeke's hurdle of the guy the other day was more impressive than about anything I've seen Tony Pollard do this year.
True. It's been a bad year. Yeah, I'm all in on that. My first sit of the week, no surprise after everything we've already talked about this game, it's Trevor Lawrence.
Real quick, Tony Pollard is the RB17, Ty Chandler RB18 in Fantasy Pros this week. I'm definitely starting Chandler over
I'm starting Chandler over him. That's free money. I would take a straight bet that Ty Chandler has a 5-star matchup on Fantasy Pros too.
Yeah. Okay, Trevor Lawrence, sit of the week.
Yeah, I mean, first, just let me say, this season should not indicate to anybody that Trevor Lawrence is not good. He's played through like 17 injuries at this point.
Yeah.
And he's a dog for it. Like, he's going out, he's probably going to play this week and have like 4 things on the injury report. With all of that being said, the Carolina Panthers defense has been pretty good against the pass. And I don't think he's healthy enough to get things going. 2 straight weeks, he's at under 15 points.
Well, and still no Christian Kirk.
Yep. Christian Kirk's still out. And the offensive line has been beyond terrible for him. It's like 28th in pass protection from PFF. I don't see that changing at all this week against Brian Burns, who's a pretty good pass rusher. And I just don't see how the Jaguars get this one done.
Yeah, no, I agree with everything you just said. I had Calvin Ridley for a moment on my sheet as a sit and went a different direction, but I would not be enthusiastic about starting Ridley for all the reasons why I'm not enthusiastic about starting the pass catch or the pass deliverer in this game for the pass catcher.
Yeah, I'm all in on that. We won't talk much more about that game. We've said about all we can do. It's probably going to be a pretty boring game with a lot. It's going to be a really run-heavy game.
It's still going to come up one more time. Don't worry.
Well, who's your next sit?
My next sit. So I'm going to do a complete 180 from last week here. Devonta Smith, star of the week last week, paid off well, and he is going right back to my bench this week. He did all I hoped for against the Giants, took advantage of a good matchup, but that offense just still doesn't look right. Everything coming out of Philly, including from Devonta Smith, is pretty much like, hey, like we have 2 weeks to get this thing back on track. Is basically what Devonta Smith said the other day. Jalen Hurts has thrown 2 touchdowns in 4 weeks. The Cardinals are the worst team in the NFL against running backs in fantasy football this year. This just feels like a game where the Eagles can and probably will lean on their rushing attack this week. I think there are a lot safer plays with a similar type of ceiling to Devonta Smith this week that I would rather, look toward, like T. Higgins. Even in a bad matchup, I'm playing T. Higgins over Devonta Smith this week, just as an example.
Yeah, I like that. Like you said, this Eagles, it's been a full season now almost of this new offense without Nick Sirianni. And the only thing they consistently are doing is getting the tush push in. Yeah. Jalen Hurts has 12 touchdowns from 1 yard or less. That's really their offense when they get in the red zone.
Did you see the clip of Jason Kelce talking about that on the New Heights podcast?
No, I didn't.
He tells DeAndre Swift every time he gets tackled on the 1 yard line, "Sorry, man, but you know what we're about to do."
I don't know if that play needs banned, but it is definitely concerning.
I don't think so, because it's only the Eagles that are doing it.
It's only Jason Kelce who can do it.
Kelce and Hurts, like that combination.
Yeah. But yeah, I'm getting off that as much as I can. It's a friendly matchup against Arizona, but this is probably going to be one of those games where the Eagles get stoutly ahead enough that they're not going to need their passing attack. And in the same vein of that, I still don't trust the splits when Dallas Goedert is healthy. Have always been against Devonta Smith. He's been healthy. He just had a really good matchup last week that helped him out. So I'm with you on all of that. Surprisingly, they barely walked out of that matchup that we thought was easy last week.
Yeah, I know it. Okay, have you given both your sits? Do you have one more?
No, my next one. This one is in light of today's news, but I'm sitting Courtland Sutton. The Courtland Sutton experience has been him and Russ fit really well together, which Russ throws deep contested balls and Courtland Sutton catches deep contested balls. And with Jared Stidham starting, he's not a quarterback who has thrown many contested balls. This is from Hayden Winks on Twitter. But among his career starts, the average target from Jared Stidham goes to wide receivers with at least 2 yards of separation. Courtland Sutton on the year averages 0.8 yards per separation per route run. And he's just not a separator. He's never been a separator. He's made his fantasy mojo all year on really tight window contested catch throws. They've been really impressive, but that's just fit really well with Russell Wilson. We've talked about it before. It's not going to be that way this week. They're benching him, and it looks like he's getting cut by the Broncos in March, is what the reports are saying.
Yeah, I mean, they're benching him basically to not trigger, whatever like games played guarantee he has to, like, they're still going to eat a big chunk of change by cutting him. But that is what it seems like. Schefter, the fact that, did you see his tweet about it?
I've turned pretty sour on the Adam Schefter trade.
So Schefter tweeted, like in the same tweet where he's breaking the news, whatever, that the Broncos, who are 1-3 in their last 4, are looking for an offensive spark with Jared Stidham down the stretch. Where it's like, no, like everybody else is reporting, like, no, like this is entirely about his contract. Like, how could you say with a straight face that, yeah, we're going like, I know Stidham's not terrible, but Russ has actually been okay. He's not been the problem for Denver largely this year now, maybe at times, but like he's been okay. It's just like that clearly is not what's happening here.
Yeah, I mean, Denver signed a bad contract. They're trying to get out of it however they can.
Yeah.
I don't know if you saw the report. I think it was from Ari Mirov, but he went on to say, like, after the win against Kansas City, the front office for Denver pulled him aside and said they want him to move his injury guarantees back to 2025. He said he wouldn't. Then obviously Denver went on a tear and won a bunch of close games. and the NFLPA had to get involved in negotiations because they were just trying to change Russ's contract.
No, I didn't see that.
It's a pretty ugly situation in Denver. Next year, we will see Arthur Smith with Russell Wilson in Atlanta, and this will get even funnier for his career arc. Fantasy Pros has Cortland Sutton as wide receiver 51 right now, and actually Jerry Jeudy above him.
That's wild.
It's super weird.
I mean, I'm all for getting off Sutton this week, but I'm definitely not getting off of Sutton and starting Jerry Jeudy in his place.
No. I mean, I'd still probably rank him in my top 40. He plays a Chargers defense, which is pretty terrible. So, but yeah, that one was wild too. So yeah, I'm getting off Sutton though this week. I'm not expecting some big touchdowns, some deep throws. This is probably going to be Sean Payton really coaching his offense, which we know what it is. It's short throws, intermediate throws, and then some heavy run and play action mixed in with that.
All right, we'll get through a couple streams here, quarterback and defense, and get out of here pretty quickly. Speaking of wild career arcs, that's Baker Mayfield. I'm going right back to Baker Mayfield. Well, again, is he one of yours too?
Yeah.
I mean, it's not even a plus matchup this time. The Saints are 9th best against quarterbacks this year, but I don't know how you go away from a guy who has strung together consecutive weeks of really good fantasy performances. He's looked good, just real life NFL. Colin Cowherd was giving him major props today. I don't know if you saw that. It's like that tells you
which is wild
how good Baker has been. They even Colin Cowherd's like, tip of the cap. Chris Godwin looks like Chris Godwin. Mike Evans is awesome. And when you have Baker slinging it like he is, he's accurate and decisive right now, and 2 great receivers. You just can't go away from that. He's 7th in the NFL in EPA per play against top 10 defenses. So even in a bad matchup, I am not afraid of going to Baker Mayfield this week.
No, like I said, I'm with you on that. Again, Marshawn Lattimore is also out. The Baker Mayfield to Mike Evans connection is absolutely electric. Mike Evans is, I think he already set his career high in touchdowns, and the style of play Baker Mayfield has, which is very similar to what we talked about earlier with Joe Flacco, where he's like, I know he's down there, I'm throwing it to him, fits so well with Mike Evans that it's really worked out. Both those guys, I think, are probably going to be Bucks again when their contracts are up, and it's working really well for Tampa Bay.
Well, and Godwin looking like Godwin is interesting too, because the one thing about Baker has always been the over the middle stuff. He hasn't been able to process, and just I don't want to say he's too short to see over his offensive line, because there's obviously other short guys who haven't, but it just seems like the processing stuff hasn't been there. And then the lack of height has not helped matters in that regard.
Yeah.
But I mean, he's clearly doing it right now.
Yeah. He has 8 touchdowns over the last 3 weeks, no interceptions. He's taking care of the ball. He has almost 1,000 yards over his last 3 games. It's pretty hard. I think he's a top streaming option. And I mean, if I was one of those guys, I would probably start him over Tua. I'd probably start him over Jared Goff. I'd definitely start him over Trevor Lawrence. I mean, he's probably a top 8 quarterback for me.
I mean, I don't think it's crazy to say you're benching Mahomes for Baker Mayfield this week.
No, I don't think it is either, with the matchup and considering the struggles Kansas City has had.
Okay, so that was your stream of the week as well. We both have one more. This second one for me is, I hinted at it earlier. This is less of a, because it's really hard to find more than like one quarterback streamer that streams.
Is it Bryce Young?
Yes, it's Bryce Young. And this is like, if you're in a 2 quarterback or if you're in a super deep league, I'm not advocating for Bryce Young as a top 12 to 16 play, but I do think he is an okay quarterback too, against the Jags team that is 30th against quarterbacks this season, allowing 20.3 points per game per fantasy life. Young just threw for 300 yards for the first time against, like you said, a very suspect Packers defense. Positive EPA per play for Bryce Young for the first time in his career as well. They target that intermediate area, 10 to 19 air yards at the highest rate in a game this season, just under 50%. And he was 10 of 16 for $178 and 2 touchdowns. DJ Chark really got on track. That connection is nice to see. Can hopefully help going forward down the stretch for Bryce Young and for the Panthers. And I know it was against Green Bay, but like if you just go watch the highlights, you see some of those accurate throws, ripping down the sideline and on the out routes where it's like, this looks like the guy we saw in college.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel that. I think it's a good start of the week. The offense is playing better now that they have fired everybody
Yeah.
in that room. And it's a good matchup for them because this Jacksonville defense just hasn't been good. And I think they're going to be in some positive situations because I think this offense is going to struggle to move the ball at times. And with the Trevor Lawrence injuries, they're going to probably get some easy fumbles or some easy pick opportunities. And with all of that in the game, you have a pretty positive one. And again, this is a Carolina Panthers team and coaching staff. All of them are playing for, their jobs next season. They're
Mhm.
trying to prove a point that they're not as bad as they looked for the majority of the year. And again, without their pick, there's no reason for them to go out there and
Yep.
make any questionable starts.
Yep. Okay. Your second stream.
This one's like has an asterisk next to it, but it's Gardner Minshew against Las Vegas. Las Vegas is the number one streaming defense right now, and they would probably be in my streams. I didn't put them, but
They are in my streams,
yeah,
and basically my reasoning is they've scored defensive touchdowns. Was it multiple against the Chargers? It was multiple against the Chiefs.
yeah,
They've scored defensive touchdowns the last couple of weeks. They are playing with their hair on fire right now, and Malcolm. I don't. Is it Kuntz? I'm not sure how I pronounce his last name. It's Koonce. He is turning into a good edge rusher opposite Max Crosby. We know Max Crosby is awesome. So if you can get pressure on Gardner Minshew, you can replicate those defensive touchdowns. But give me the pro Colts, pro Minshew case.
Minshew hasn't scored less than 15 fantasy points with Michael Pittman in the lineup. Last week he didn't have him, obviously, and I think that led to his struggles. He's also sixth in the NFL in rushing touchdowns among starting quarterbacks since week 10. Again, the Shane Steichen coached offense utilizes the legs of their quarterback because it was built for a different quarterback named Anthony Richardson. Blessed be his name. And with that, I like that. I also, going back to the Raiders defense, they have been really not lucky, but when you're scoring this many defensive possessions,
Uh,
it's usually not a good sign that the defense is actually that good. Their secondary over the last 3 weeks ranks top 6 in the NFL in QB passing yards allowed, but on the season they rank in the bottom 8. So I really think they just caught fire quickly, but I don't expect that to continue. I also really trust this
they also held the Dolphins
Indianapolis
to
offense.
20 points coming off the bye since that bye week post
They
Josh McDaniels.
They did, but I'm still, and again, it is terrible quarterback landscape. So we're really digging down in the trenches here, but I'm going with Gardner Minshew. I think he'll put up a good top 15 QB performance, which is all you can really ask for at this point.
Yeah, no, it's not a tear. I think both things can happen. I think Minshew can be a stream and the Raiders defense.
Yes, he could throw a pick six. I'm okay
Yeah.
with that.
he definitely could, and then go, and then go down and score another touchdown and pull his team back to within 10 points, whatever the case may be. I'll just give you my second streaming defense. You can give me both yours real quick, and then we get out of here. My second one is the Seahawks. They are not a good defense, but anytime, I don't care what happened last week, anytime I can get Mason Rudolph traveling to a hostile environment across the country, like I think I'm just going to ride that. If I'm desperate for a defense, I'm going to look at Seattle. 6 sacks against the Titans last week. They've given it up to running backs a lot this year, especially the last couple of weeks. So you think Warren and Najee are in a pretty good spot, but I'm just feeling the potential for turnovers after they show the ability to get to the quarterback and they get Mason Rudolph this week.
Yeah, I don't hate picking on Mason Rudolph at all. So I hear that. Although the way he played well last week was it's like the Will Levis performance we had in week 6, where he threw a lot of, someone's down their balls and they worked out. But those 50-50 balls really come back to bite you and are bad.
By the way, Deontay Johnson should have a 69-yard touchdown to his name. That was just tough.
Deontay Johnson had 3 straight weeks of touchdowns with Mitch Trubisky, and then they start some guy named Rudolph on Christmas, and he sucks.
All right, your streaming defenses.
The first one I'm doing is Chicago versus Atlanta.
Yep.
I don't know what's going on in Atlanta, but Chicago's defense has been salty. They were good again last week in another difficult matchup. They've consistently scored points off turnovers. They lead the NFL in turnovers since week 10. And with the addition of Montez Sweat, he's now their sack leader. He's also the Washington Commanders sack leader. Hasn't played there since the trade.
That's got to be pretty rare for a guy to lead 2 teams in the same season in sacks. We'll see. We'll see if Washington can wipe that off the board, but that would be pretty cool if he ends that way.
Yeah. And I think Atlanta's still technically in the playoff run, but I have a feeling that entire coaching staff should be gone by the end of this year. And I just don't know. Like Taylor Heineke is not that good. He throws a lot of off-target throws. I think it's a good chance for Jalen Johnson to eat. And if he gets DJ Moore, if he gets matched up with Drake London, they have nowhere else to go on this defensive side of the ball.
Did you see the play where Bijan easily could have had a receiving touchdown, and instead of just standing there and catching the ball, he kind of did the thing. It's almost like on Madden when an animation screws you up. He just kept backing up and caught the ball out of bounds. Basically is what he did.
Oh my God.
I think Ian Hartons tweeted it out. I'll go find it and send it to you later. But yeah, pretty brutal for Bijan. Your second defense.
Going back to this game. So I'm taking the Jags at Carolina.
Man, we are locked in on Jacksonville, Carolina this week,
which is just terrible for so many reasons. There legitimately aren't any good matchups this week. Like it's so bad. I'm going with this based solely on the fact that I don't think Bryce Young is going to throw for 300 yards again. I know he was your start of the week, but
he was like if you're in a 2-quarterback league, I'm not anxious to get him in there in a 1-quarterback league.
So I'm going with this. They have decent pass rushers. I think they're going to get pressure on Bryce Young, get a few sacks, call it an 8-point game, and walk out of there.
Yeah. No, I think that's a totally reasonable opinion. The alert 7 minutes ago, the Broncos are expected to cut Russell Wilson in March.
Yep.
Where's Russ cooking next? Sleeper HQ asked.
I
think Atlanta. I think you've made the call already.
No, send him to Pittsburgh, and George Pickens is right in my top 20.
All right, last thing before we jump out of here, just real quick, we'll give the league a spotlight here for just a second. Troll knocks off Ty against all odds in the semifinals. J-Law's miraculous run comes to an unfortunate end at the hands of Amari Cooper and Eli. So we have an all Beery finals. Just give me one word. Who are you taking, Noah or Eli?
It's the Beery Bros final. I'm taking Eli.
I'm going Noah. I'm at Christian McCaffrey.
Christian McCaffrey against Washington is absolutely absurd. I'm going with Eli. I've picked Eli every week to win. Just going to let him keep rolling. I feel he's going to hit it. Last week he had Amari Cooper and George Pickens. Didn't start one of them. Didn't matter. This week, maybe he starts both of them, and they both go off for 100 points. Who knows?
Maybe. All right. That is our prediction for the league, and that is going to do it for this week's Half Point Per Podcast. Thank you all so much for listening. As I said at the top, this is only going to be a YouTube only week this week. We'll be back with the regular podcast, I believe, next week, and we'll have some fun post-mortem fantasy season topics to look back at the year that was and the calls that were on this podcast. So that'll be fun. Thank you guys so much for listening, and we'll talk to you again next week.